I don't know about you, panel, but I don't think adulthood becomes more admirable simply because capitalism has convinced people that they're better off learning to live without their parents in the status quo. I don't think the most humane society is one where the moment the child becomes economically functional, we rename distance as a maturity and sustained obligation as dependence. That is exactly why middle and lower income families are left without meaningful intergenerational protection, unlike rich communities, for example, which can quietly preserve closeness through wealth, networks, and fallback capital, and poorer families are thrown into a rat race with no communal standard that legitimizes staying tied to one another. And because of that, that norm does not protect them. It becomes far easier for capitalism to fragment those families and isolate those children and force them to face precarity alone. Like the fact that you will be staying in an abusive household because you don't have any fallback. The fact that you will be staying in a toxic job because you also don't have any fallback, and a communal standard that forces family to stay one within each other because we don't have that right now in the status quo. But before any of that, I want to deal with the principle that they're trying to smuggle through the back door. At this point, opposition is reaching for the hardest cases. They talked about toxic families, controlling parents, conservative household, adults who need space, people who are hurt. Irrelevant because you need to judge this on the median. Two things. First, no one in our side romanticizes abuse, and nothing about this motion requires people to remain close to dangerous and violent parents. Those relationships are already broken by something more serious than the norm we are discussing. That's why in both sides, you will not get any ties with them at all. You need to prove why the norm makes it impossible to happen, which is too late for them to build that whip. So at this point, their comparative that they rely on is simply wash. But secondly, it is a massive mistake to universalize the hardest and worst families in order to set out expectation for everyone else. Because the enormous numbers of families that are imperfect but not abusive, continued closeness is a trap right now for them. It is often only on the condition under which repair, softening, renegotiation, and gradual understanding which we can actually prosper and fix those status. Distance, right now, freezes people in the worst version of each other. And Joseph talked about why it's in these cases where people cannot have any space to reconcile or talk with one another, not until their mother is on the verge of dying in hospital beds, because the societal expectation drives us to the rat race that we have talked about. What have we proven so far? First, we have proven how capitalism is mediated by norms rather than operating on people in a vacuum. The market right now rewards mobility, individualization, and self-sufficiency, but those pressure only becomes fully dominate when there's no countervailing communal expectation telling people that family obligation is still legitimate, respectable, or worth organizing life around. So once closeness to the parents becomes social default, adults are more willing to choose proximity in our side because we can pool resources and share care even when the market would prefer atomized units, which means that capitalism in our side no longer easily converts poor families into isolated units that we have talked about. That is why on the Philippines, for example, we have pushed for holidays that actually caters for these norms and practices. We have given them bonus for these specific norms. So, which doesn't happen in the majority of cases or majority of instances within the status quo because of the norm that they have pushed forward. And I don't think there's any positive case coming from side negative that they have built forward from their LO to TLO. They just talked about why independence right now is is placed in scarcity because you don't have any time. That's why you need to fuck off your within your family units. That's why you need to build your own self. And that's what we have proven so far. Like the fact that you will be placed in that condition is actually really, really, really bad. Like you will also experience that once you grow up and once you tie yourself out of your family when they grow up. So second, we have proven that this motion is a world reset, which means opposition cannot just point out to the status quo that doesn't look like this. We're just relying on Japan, Korea, and other examples. We are defending a new default that recognizes behavior around intergenerational closeness, and this is precisely the prerequisite to making this relationship less controlling. When parents are more secure that closeness within their children will continue into adulthood, they're less likely to govern that relationship through fear, guilt, or overreach because they no longer feel that distance is always one act of disobedience away. In our world, closeness is normalized and durable, so the relationship is more likely to mature into reciprocity rather than becoming distorted by panic, possession, and any attempts to forcibly preserve contact, which is just simply clears out the comparative that they never responded into because they thought that this is a THPT motion. And the comparative is crucial because in the status quo, people may still love their parents, but the surrounding system constantly tells them to deprioritize that loves. And this is why what this motion actually tells us. Like, this is where the motion actually applies. Jobs right now rewards mobility, just like what they have talked about. Cities separate families and time is followed by works. That's why adult success is measured by how self-sufficient and frictionless you appear. So even if people privately care, sustained closeness is hard to justify, hard to coordinate, and easy to sacrifice. On our side, that sacrifice becomes less necessary because the communal standard now protects that choice. That means we do not make adults feel nicer about family. We make it more socially and materially possible for the family to continue doing actual work in people's life. But for that, POI.
Very unclear to me how strong this communal standard is that is able to affect any sort of capitalist structure in the first place. Please engage.
Even if it's not that strong enough, like for example, you will push every work institution to just simply have this trade-off, have these practices in the first place. And even if you don't change the structure of capitalism, you change how you view and protect yourself under capitalism. That means you have all of those protection within your tight-knit communities, which doesn't happen in your side, because you will realize you're going to more likely fuck off and you won't have any benefit at all. That is why that's the crucial default in your side, and you guys are losing because you don't have any positive case to clear out the problems that you accuse us of. First, parents, they talked about why parents becomes toxic when love is experienced as zero-sum struggle against outside institution. In the psycho, adulthood is coded as separation, which means parents are taught that the work partners, peers, migration, and independence are all things that gradually replace them. So once that relationship is understood in competitive terms, in their side, parents become more likely to react defensively. That's why you don't have any protective mech at all. In our world, that competition is softened because adulthood no longer signifies relational exit. So parents have less reason to interpret their child's growth as abandonment and less incentive to react through resentment and possessiveness because they know that they won't get left off due to the standard of the norm. Second, they have talked about why parents becomes toxic when the relationship lacks stability, what adulthood is supposed to look like. In the status quo, there's a clash between two instincts. Parents still feel deep attachment and obligation, but the wider culture tells them that a successful adult should increasingly need them less. That's why in our side, we clear that contradiction and we fix all of these norms to begin with.